裏か運を試してみよう。
あなたのための贈り物です。
皆さんの力を貸してください。負けません。容赦しません。皆さん遅すぎた後悔よ。
愛の私の気持ち、私の気持ち、私の気持ち、私の気持ち。
エディニティ号の名のもとに。
これもなかなか愛を込めて。やっせいは愛の私の気持ち。や私の気持ち。私の気持ち、私の気持ち。受け取ってください。
負けません。
せいは愛のやこれもなかなかこれもなかなかこれもなかなかこれもなかなか手強いですよ。
皆小さな光を最大限に集めて鋭く華麗に。死は怖くなりません。だからこそ立ち向かうんです。後悔なさる必要はありません。
Hey guys, Misery here, back with another Elysium video. And in today's video, the dev livestream for Season 3 and Heidemarie's kit reveal just got released. And I'm just gonna say this right now, Heidemarie looks absolutely insane. She looks like an insane power creep character, like, you know, right when we first got Serennial back in December. This is kind of how I'm feeling when we first got Serennial. When we first got Serennial, like, she was absolutely insane, better than anything we had in the game at the moment. That's kind of like how Heidemarie is feeling right now. The ceiling for her kit looks absolutely insane. It looks like she's gonna be able to dish out so much damage, but not only that, she should be able to enable other characters' cards using her new Link mechanic. So starting off with Heidemarie's basic mechanics, like I just said, she has a new mechanic called Link. So basically what Linked does, when this card is used manually, discard all the other linked cards in hand. So keyword there, discard. So this is of course going to work well with discard units such as Diana and Renoa. And then we also have another new effect called Effulgent Light. And when Effulgent Light stacks to 3, it'll change Effulgent Compression into Effulgent Release. And Effulgent Compression is one of her cards. It's actually the card that can't get an epiphany, but you know, it will create Effulgent Release once you get those Effulgent Light stacks to 3. And then here are some basic strategies for Heidemarie. So the entire kit of Heidemarie basically revolves around her new gimmick called Link and, you know, these Effulgent Blades. These Effulgent Blades you can like see as bullet cards if you're familiar with other creation card units such as Luke or Renoa. They create a ton of bullets. Basically Heidemarie is creating a ton of these Effulgent Blades. So you create a bunch of Effulgent Blades, but then you'll apply Linked to those attack cards. And as we know, when you manually use a Linked card, it'll activate all the Linked cards. So that'll trigger and give you more Effulgent Light stacks for your Effulgent Compression, which turns into Effulgent Release. And then getting onto her basic cards, we have Sword Flash and Sword Barrier. So Sword Flash, just a basic attack basically, but it also gives plus 30% damage amount to Effulgent Blade for 1 turn. That is additive 30% since it has the plus sign, which, you know, it may not be the worst thing because that's like 1.5 morale. And you know, as we know, morale is very good on units who spam low multiplier cards, but Heidemarie's cards actually look pretty decent for the multipliers. So it really depends. When she comes out, we'll have to do more testing with her. But that plus 30% damage amount is actually from a potential. It's not on the base like Sword Flash without the potential. And then we have Sword Barrier, which is just shield. But I presume we're probably going to get rid of both of these basic cards like most units. You know, like we really don't keep basic cards for like any units at all anymore. Not since like the beginning of the game. But yeah, those are her basic cards. And then moving on to her first epiphany card, it's called Sword Rain. So as you see all of the epiphanies up on the screen right now, I'm actually surprised because this first epiphany has attunement, which I was not expecting attunement. That is an effect that we got back late in season 1 on the Eternal Hunger Forbidden card. So if you're discarding this first epiphany with Nia and putting it at the top of the dropout and drawing it again, you know, there's some synergy there potentially, because that's basically how you play Eternal Hunger Nia. It's basically the same thing with this first Sword Rain. I'm not going to go over all the epiphanies, but you know, most of these epiphanies for this card kind of look like they can do whatever. Like you have this third one that activates them, you have this fourth one that creates them. We actually have a finale card at the end there, which I'm surprised we don't have many finale cards in the game, but that's 600% damage, so that's probably going to be nuking a ton, and it's to all enemies, so that's probably going to be insane for Swordy or Chaos. But yeah, that is her epiphany card called Sword Rain. And then onto her next epiphany card called Hero to All. So something I have to state for this card specifically that is very important, like you see this first one, draw 3, you may see that and may think it's insane, but if you read the text under it, link at those cards for this turn. As we know, you can only manually play one of those linked cards and then it will discard the rest. So say you draw 3 and you want to use one of those cards, that's good, right? You're gonna have to discard the other 2. So this is ideally going to want to be used on, you know, units that have discard cards such as Renoa's bullets or, you know, Diana's bullets that scale off of discard, because you're going to be forced to discard 2 of that draw 3. But the second one, I'm pretty sure the second one is an actual draw 3, because it'll draw 3, right? Then it'll apply linked to 1 cost or lower card in hands. So if you draw a bunch of 2 or 3 cost cards with this second epiphany for hero to all, I think that's just a straight up draw 3, and it's not going to apply linked on those cards, so you won't have to discard them upon using like whatever card you want to use. But yeah, as you see, most of these epiphanies for hero to all, like the 3rd and 5th one, also have draw. You know, this is probably going to be like her drawing card. She is a ranger, and you know, rangers are kind of known for having some draw. It really depends, because you know, we have the best drawer in the game, Veronica, and she draws an insane amount. So like once I first saw this draw 3 card, I thought it was gonna, you know, maybe compete with Veronica, but I'm pretty sure Veronica is still gonna be on top drawing wise. But yeah, that is her epiphany card called hero to all. Moving on to the next epiphany card called Thread of Light. So this is gonna be like one of your damaging cards, whereas the last one was kind of like a buffing card, or you know, like enabling you to set up. It looks like most of these Thread of Light cards actually scale with how many linked cards you have in hand, and as we know, that's Heidemarie's whole gimmick. You know, you're gonna want a bunch of linked cards and Effulgent blades. With this 4th epiphany, you can even activate all linked cards in hand without discarding them, but it has exhaust and it's cost 3, so pretty expensive. This 5th one is looking pretty good though, because it's AoE, so you know, that's gonna be good for chaos or sortie, and it hits a ton, 420% damage times 2, and when this card is discarded, you even do more damage, but it's AoE. So I'm pretty sure the initial part of that card is single target, but then when you discard it, you get AoE. And yeah, that's kind of like her Thread of Light card, you know, mainly just an attack card and does a ton of damage. Moving on to the next epiphany card, which is called Effulgent Expansion. So this is also going to be another support card, enabling you to set up so you can get all the cards you need for your cycle and rotation in hand. And as you read most of these Effulgent expansions, they create Effulgent blades. So this is probably going to be like one of the main cards you use to create a ton of Effulgent blades. Like this 4th one here, create 10 Effulgent blades in discard pile. That is like a ton. It is 2 cost, but it has Quietus, so you can activate it for free just by discarding. Very curious how you're going to get those 10 Effulgent blades out of the discard pile, but you know, I'm sure a lot of people are going to be testing her. You know, this game is very complex, you know, so many different sequences, so many different things people experiment with. So yeah, very curious to see how that epiphany will work. And then these first 2, they just create Effulgent blades, but also, you know, buff the damage of Effulgent blade. This 5th one is an upgrade, but at the start of the turn, you create 2 Effulgent blades. You also get plus 50% damage amount to Effulgent blades. So that 5th epiphany is for more like probably longer term content. It is an upgrade, and Heidemarie is passion, so this 5th epiphany can proc the Spark of Passion set, since you need to activate an upgrade card to get the buff from that set. And then moving on to her last card called Effulgent Compression. I was talking about this a little bit earlier. This is the one where you want to get Effulgent Light stacks, and this will turn into Effulgent Release. You actually can't play this until you get the Effulgent Light stacks, because there's no cost on this. It's just unplayable. But yeah, this is going to turn into Effulgent Release, and basically what Effulgent Release does is that exhaust all Effulgent blades in graveyard, then plus 60% damage amount for each exhausted, and at the end of the turn, this will change back into Effulgent Compression. So this actually works like Charon's E3, or if you have the partner Bria for Charon, in a way, because you're exhausting all Effulgent blades in graveyard. That's basically what Charon does with this utility on E3 or Bria, and then you get a damage percentage amount for each exhausted. Wait, so this is actually probably going to scale really well with that card that creates 10 Effulgent blades in the discard pile, because the discard pile and the graveyard are basically the same thing, just different names. So you can use that create 10 and then pop the Effulgent Release and get plus 600% damage amount, and that is a ton of damage. That's pretty high. So maybe that's what they were thinking when they made that card that creates 10 Effulgent blades. And then onto her ego skill called Elysium of Blades. This is 5 ego points. In the top left, you see those 5 light blue bars. That means it's 5 ego points. But basically what this ego skill does, 400% damage, and then plus 80% damage amount for each card discarded this battle, max 20 cards. That is this battle, not turn. So you know, you've probably done this already, and you're getting an extra 1600% damage amount, making this 2000% damage. This is probably going to go up more with the E3 later on when we talk about the manifest egos, but yeah, that is a very big amount of damage. Pretty straightforward, kind of simple. I don't really need to talk about it much. I will have the new effects in her kit up on the screen with the ego skill, just the linked and the Effulgent Light stacks. As we know, linked when this card is used manually, discard all the other linked cards in hand, and then Effulgent Light, when Effulgent Light stacks to 3, change Effulgent Compression into Effulgent Release. On effect activation, remove Effulgent Light. So yeah, that's the ego skill and her new effects to her kit. Moving on to the potentials. First potential we have, basic card, add the following effect to the Sword Flash card, plus 30% damage amount to Effulgent Blade for 1 turn. That's what I was talking about earlier, that this is unlocked by a potential. Nothing too big, does give more value to the basic cards. So for those people who aren't min-maxing and maybe keeping this card, it's some extra value, but most people are probably going to be removing the basic cards. Of course, Heidemarie is a DPS, so we have the crit chance and crit damage nodes on her. Also good value and really solid for, you know, anybody who wants to do big damage. So yeah, next potential we have, plus 5% damage amount to Heidemarie's Sword Flash, and if Heidemarie's attack is greater than 500, add an additional plus 5% to the modifier, just plus 10% damage to Sword Flash, her basic card that we're going to be removing. And then onto her unique potential. So if Heidemarie Heidemarie's attack is greater than 600 plus 5% attribute damage amount, and for every 20 attack above 600, added an additional plus 2% up to an additional plus 10%. So that basically caps out at 700 attack, which is pretty easy to get unless I'm doing the math wrong, but it sounds like it's 700. Everybody should definitely be hitting that. I mean, like, we're getting like 900, 1000 attack on other characters, so this definitely should be pretty easy to get and everyone should have. But yeah, those are her potentials, everything you need to know about them. Moving on to the Manifest Ego, starting off with the E1 plus 100% damage amount to Effulgent release card, and the added damage amount for each Effulgent blade in the graveyard becomes plus 80% now. For E2, this is a pretty long text. It is cut off a little bit, but I know what's cut off, so I'll just, explain what's cut off. So at the start of the battle, move the Effulgent Compression card to hand. The start of the turn, gain 5 Crimson Blade, and a Crimson Blade is a buff. When a linked card is used manually or discarded, 120% extra attack to the enemy with the highest HP, and when activated, decrease Crimson Blade. That has a max stack of 8, I'm pretty sure, for the Crimson Blades. But yeah, her E2 sounds pretty strong because you're gonna be like linking and discarding so many cards with Heidemarie, and maybe like you're using Diana also with her, or even Renoa. Moving on to the E3 plus 200% damage amount to Elysium Blades, and change the plus 80% damage amount max 20 cards effect to plus 100% max 30 cards damage amount for each card discarded this battle. This E3 is actually like, this sounds insane because that's 3000% and its base is 400%, I'm pretty sure. So 400 plus the extra 200%, that's 600, plus the new 30 stack cap, that's 3000, so 3600. I'm pretty sure if I'm doing the math right for this E3. That's got to be one of the highest hitting E3s in the game. Like, of course you have Charon's E3, which infinitely scales, so Charon's E3 can do more damage than this, but you do need to ramp up. For Heidemarie's E3, you also need to ramp up, but the ramp up on this is a lot faster, I'm pretty sure. And then moving on to her E4, when manually using or discarding Heidemarie's linked cards, gain 1 Effulgent Chain. An Effulgent Chain is plus 5% damage amount to Heidemarie, max 10 stacks, so that's plus 50% damage amount to Heidemarie's attacks. Some extra nice damage, plus 50% amount is actually pretty good. That's 2.5 per round, and she's gonna be spamming so many attacks, so yeah, solid. And then moving on to the E6, we don't do the E5 because it's just a throwaway dupe for everyone. So E6, change created Effulgent Blade cards to all attribute cards, and each time Crimson Blade is activated, plus 40% damage amount to Crimson Blade with a max of plus 480%. So maybe the max stack of Crimson Blade isn't 8 like I said earlier, it's 12. 4 times 12 is 480. I don't know, the E2 said max stack of 8. I'm not really sure what it was referring to when it got cut off, but that's what it said in the dev live stream. But the important part of this E6, it changes all the created Effulgent Blade cards to all attribute cards. So what an all attribute card is, it's basically always attack, weakness, divine on the card, but without, like, you don't need a divine for this. So no matter what the affinity is, you'll always be hitting weakness, which is a very strong increase, because when you're attacking enemies that are weak to your cards, you do like 2.5 times more damage. It's a pretty insane damage increase. But yeah, that's her E6 and all of her ego manifestations. Her ego manifestations, as expected for a limited unit, sound really good. Only the E2, E3, and E6 are what I'm looking at. Those seem to be her best ones. And then onto the team recommendations for Heidemarie. First off, we have Heidemarie, Diana, and Nia. Of course, all 3 of these units scale off a discard. Heidemarie has Quietus cards. You want to also discard her cards since they have Quietus. Same with Diana. Quietus cards want to be discarded. Nia does a lot of discarding with her Adagio. So a ton of synergy in that first team there. And then the second team, Heidemarie, Nia, and Cassius. Cassius can also discard cards also with his shuffle. Pretty sure it has an epiphany that discards all cards in hand. It does have the exhaust modifier on it, sadly, but Cassius can still discard cards. And then onto the third team recommendation, which is pretty interesting. They have Heidemarie, Rita, and Veronica. It is late over here at the time of me recording this, so forgive me if I'm not seeing the synergy here, but nothing is really clicking off the top of my head at first glance when I think of Heidemarie and Rita. Maybe I'm missing something, and I'm very curious to see how this team works out and how people are going to use this. But yeah, those are her team compositions that the devs recommended for us for Heidemarie. Lastly, we have a partner called Sylvia. So Sylvia is going to increase the combat's attack by 16%, and also each time the assigned combat's linked cards are used manually or discarded, you gain 1 Zephyr, which is a new buff. Basically, what Zephyr does, when you reach 3 of Zephyr, you get plus 20% critical damage to the assigned combatant. The number on the left is for E0. The number on the right is, max dupe. So of course, I'm not mentioning the max dupe number because, that's not realistic for most people. But on top of the plus 20% critical damage you're getting to, whoever has this equipped, but Zephyr is also giving plus 15% damage amount to the assigned combat's passion attack cards with a max of 3 stacks. So that's going up to plus 45% damage amount. And then onto Sylvia's ego skill called Field Overview. This is really cheap. It costs 2 ego points. So basically what this does, select up to 2 cards in hand and you apply link to those cards. The selected card is the combatant's linked card. Get plus 10% critical damage to the assigned combat for each. So this doesn't really sound as universal as Peko did when Sereno came out, but this this does still like sound pretty good and usable on all passion characters. As long as you have Heidemarie in the team to apply linked, I'm pretty sure Sylvia can just be on anyone. If you're running 2 passion units in the team, maybe you can put this on Diana instead and then buff Diana with Sylvia rather than Heidemarie. But Heidemarie is probably going to be doing way more damage than Diana. So I mean, like, of course you're going to want this on Heidemarie. But yeah, that is Heidemarie's partner called Sylvia. I think that's kind of like everything you need to know and that they went over in the dev live stream. Let me know what you guys' thoughts on Heidemarie are. I think she looks absolutely amazing. I like her design. I like Sylvia's design. I think the affinity background up on the screen right now looks pretty good too. But Heidemarie's ceiling looks very, very high. I think she's probably gonna maybe be the next best DPS in the game with how much damage she's going to do. Of course, Heidemarie is a limited unit. She is the first limited we got since Serennial. So, you know, it's been 4 months since we had a limited unit. Limited units do not go to the standard banner and they're only there for a certain amount of time. So, you know, it's best to get these limited units when they're on banner because who knows when they're going to come back. It could be like 3 months from now, it could be 5, could be 7, we don't know. But yeah, really stoked for season 3, the release of Heidemarie, and you notice everything they have to offer for the upcoming season. But if this video was informative, I very much appreciate if you could show support to the channel. You guys have been showing a ton of support, and I thank every one of you who watches my videos, leaves comments, leaves likes. It all means a ton to me. I'm trying to hit my next milestone of 4K subscribers. You know, we're getting there pretty fast, so thank you guys. But yeah, that's gonna be the video. I hope you guys take care, peace, and be safe until the next one.